Welcome. Today I want to talk to you about functions. Functions are super powerful, super useful ways of making your own command. For instance, say you want to make a command that checks if two numbers divide evenly. You could just be like, okay, start with the words public and static for now. Later on, you'll find out what they mean and what they're useful for. Now, if I want to figure out if something is a number is evenly divisible by another number, say like is 10 evenly divided by 2, or is 23 evenly divided by 3? What I really want to return, what I want it to be equal to, is either true or false. Now, a variable that's only either true or false is called a Boolean. Boolean. And so we'll always start with these two words, public, static, and then we've got the return type. In this case, we want to make a function that is equal to something, and what it's equal to in this case is either true or false, and a variable that's equal to that is called a Boolean. I'll give it some sort of name. We gotta give our command a name if we're going to use it. So I'm going to call it divides evenly, and I'm going to need two numbers to do the name. Maybe I want to call it top and bottom for a fraction, like the number dividing by the other number, dividend and divisor if I felt like it. I'll just call it top and bottom. So everything you got in these smooth brackets here, which you always need, is whatever information you need to do the job. This is a command, and it tells you if one number is evenly divided by another number. Like 10 is evenly divided by 2, with nothing left over, no remainder. 23 is not evenly divisible by 5 or 3 or whatever it happens to be. So in the first case, it should be equal to true, and in the second case, it should be equal to false. So a couple ways I could do this. I could be like, hey, if I take the top and find the remainder when I divide it by the bottom, if that's equal to 0, then I want to return true. Anything else? If I don't have anything, if I ever have anything left over after I divide the top by the bottom, any remainder, I just want to return false. So this will work perfectly, nothing wrong with it. You can make it a little easier because this little weird bit of math here is just it's either equal to true or false on its own. And if this weird little math thing is equal to true, we want to return true. And if the weird little math thing is equal to false, we want to return false. So why don't we just return whatever this weird little math thing is equal to? And that will also work. And it's just less work. So why the heck not? So now we've made a command that is called divides evenly. We give it two numbers, and it tells you if the first number is evenly divided by the second. So why don't we see it in action? We can use the thing by using its name. If we use divides evenly, let's use my 10 and 2 example. Now, right now you won't be able to see it, so I'm going to have to put it inside a print statement. So I can do that, and it should print out true because 10 is evenly divided by 2. And I can do exactly the same thing for my 23 example. 23 is not evenly divisible by 3. So if I go and run this program, I've used my command twice with different information, different arguments. And now it should print true for the 10 and 2 and false for the 23 and 3, which it does. So our function works. Well, this isn't a very interesting function. Why don't we make something more interesting with it? Now, what could we do with something that can calculate if something divides evenly? Well, something some of you might be doing in math class, if you're a student, is finding the prime factors of a number. Now, we're not going to do it the most efficient way because I don't know what you know yet, but if you're in my class, you won't know all the tricks to do this the most efficient way possible, but you definitely know enough tricks to find, to make a good enough function that will do the job and be accurate. So just like the last function, we'll start with public and static. And in this case, we're going to make a function that just prints all the prime factors. So it's not equal to anything. It's doing something. It's not equal to something. So nothing, the nothing word, it doesn't return anything, is called void, like into the void. And I'm going to call this print prime factors. And I want to make this function get it so it can take a number. So I don't make it so it works with just one number. I can give it any integer I want, and it'll give me the prime factors of that integer. So I'll call it num because I lack imagination. All right, so this case, let's think through how we're going to do this. Maybe I'll keep going while num is greater than 1. Because if I keep dividing number by its prime factors, at some point it'll equal 1 once I've divided it by all its prime factors. So I'm going to use that to keep looping until I found all the prime factors, because as soon as I found one, I could make this not equals to 1 too. If I keep dividing num by its prime factors, at some point it should equal 1. Now, why don't we have a potential prime factor? We call it potential prime. And I'm going to start that at 2 because everything's divisible by 1, so that's not very helpful. So 2 is the first one that it could be. And then what I'm going to keep trying to do is I'm going to keep checking if num is evenly divisible by my potential prime I want to check. Notice I threw this little exclamation point in front because I want to keep checking the next number while it doesn't divide evenly. So, well, num is not divisible by my potential prime. I'm going to go on to the next one. And how I'm going to do that is I'll just add 1 to my potential prime. So I'm just increasing it by 1. So if my number, let's say I'm doing, I don't know, 36, or no, let's do something, let's say 9. If I check 2 and 9 is not evenly divisible by 2, I want to go check the next number. I want to check 3 next, so I'm going to add 1. As soon as this becomes false, I know that potential prime is a number that evenly divides num. I also know it's prime because it was the first number. It is the smallest number that evenly divided num. Because I've checked all of them and it was the smallest, it's got to be prime, because if it was a composite number, it's got to be made of 2 other prime numbers at least multiplied together, so I would have hit those earlier. So guaranteed, if num divides this number and we checked all the numbers from 2 up to it, that number's got to be prime. So at this point, I'll just be like, all right, I found a prime number, I want to print it out. So if I do a print statement, if I just do print so it keeps going on the same line, print my potential prime, and I also want to add a little space just so they're not all stuck together into one giant number, because that would be not so easy to read. So this just prints the potential prime I found, or the actual prime we found at this point after this while loop has executed. The only way to escape it is if num is evenly divisible by it, because that's the only thing that'll make this whole statement with the not false. So I print that in a space, and then I've taken into account that prime factor. I'm going to take num and divide it by that factor. I'm going to make it equal to what it was before, divided by my potential prime that I found. If this doesn't make sense to you, maybe this would make num equal to what it was before, but divided by this prime number we found and have already printed, because we don't want to deal with it again. If we keep dividing by all these primes, eventually we will equal 1, and then this loop will be done, and we'll have printed every prime. So let's see some examples. Now I've made this command, I can use it with whatever I want. Let's say maybe I want to know the prime factors of 2025. Or maybe I want to find the prime factors of, I don't know, 1,346. So if I run this, it should give me 2 lines that give me all my factors. Oh, one thing I should have done, maybe after I'm done here and have printed out all my primes, I will throw in a print line that doesn't print anything, and that'll just go into the next line. My problem here is I printed out all my prime factors for 2025, but then also printed out all my factors for 1,346 on the same line. So now when I run it, they'll be on separate lines. There we are. So yeah, it turns out that the prime factors of 2025 are 3, 3, 3, 3, 5, and 5. And the prime factors of 1,346 are 2 and 673, which is apparently prime. And we can do this as much as we want. So we actually made something useful, perhaps for your math class. And notice it's not that crazy. We had to do a little bit of thinking, but in terms of lines of code or complexity, it's not too crazy. Anyway, hopefully now you've got the gist of how functions work. You're making a command that you can use in other commands or you can use here. It is incredibly useful if you're going to do the same thing more than once. In this case, I want to print the prime factors of a variety of numbers. So it makes way more sense to have the code once than just keep copying and pasting this code. Because then if I had an error, like say, forgetting to put the print line in it, I don't have to go everywhere I'd cut and paste it and fix them all. I just have to fix it in one place. There's a idea in programming called dry programming, or don't repeat yourself, and functions help you do that. Yeah, so start with public static, whatever type of variable this function is equal to, whatever comes after your return. In this case, all of this evaluates to a Boolean, a true-false value. But sometimes it'll be an int if it's just a number without a decimal. Sometimes it would be a Boolean, or sorry, a double if it's something with a decimal point, or it could be a string or a char or whatever. Just whatever the whole thing is equal to, whatever comes after the return statement is what goes here after public static. And then you've got your name of your function, whatever you decide to call it. Give it a name that will help you remember what it does. And same thing with your arguments. These are the information you need to do your job. In this case, for divides evenly, remember, we were trying to find out if one number was divided by another evenly with no remainder. And so I called it top and bottom, and that kind of makes sense if you think about it as a fraction. And for this one, there is no return statement. It's not equal to anything. It just does stuff, so it's void. That's what that's called. We gave it a name that states what it does, and if we're printing the prime factors, the information we need to do our job is whatever number we want to find the prime factors of. So whenever we use this command, wherever we've got num in our function gets replaced with the argument we gave it. So in this case, everywhere you see num, just imagine that being replaced with 2025. Or the second time I use it, everywhere you see num, that being replaced with 1,346. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for listening. Have a good one.